Hello and welcome to this episode of QI Corner. I am 1031 Broker James, and this is brought to you by Best 1031 Online and the show 1031 Rules. Also supported by CRE Task Wizard. CRE Task Wizard, they are your commercial real estate virtual assistants. Please visit CRETaskWizard.com. Reach out to Kevin or Elijah, and they will help set you up with a VA to help you with those CRE tasks that you should not be doing. All right, with me today is my host and good friend, Greg Burns of 1030 IPX, 1031 Exchange. Good morning, Greg. How are you?
I'm good. How you doing?
I am excellent. Excellent. So today we're going to dive into the conversation of the build-to-suit exchange. It's actually surprising. Not many people know about this. It's not as common. It's typically more used with those more savvy people that, they own some properties and they plan out an exchange and they realize that there's an opportunity to either improve a property or even build property on a piece of land that they might exchange into. So where this has come up here recently is a lot of these merchant developers are, they'll buy the land, they'll develop a property and own it for a while, but then they want to sell and do it again. So I know that there's you can't use it as a way to fund a flip, right? Because the IRS looks at that as inventory if you do it
Yeah.
that way. So what are some of the ways that a build to suit works? But before we do that, let's just talk about, because I know a build to suit, they have to engage with you first, right?
Yeah. Anytime someone's doing an exchange, whether it be a reverse, a regular delayed exchange, or a built to suit, that you want to get obviously it's set up before anything closes, right? So that's the most important thing. And a built to suit basically does what it does is allows you to make improvements during your exchange period, to a property that you just purchased. So you typically can't, developers, they're typically excluded from 1031. They look at developers as dealers, like you mentioned. They kind of buy these properties with the intent of holding them primarily for sale. If developers could do exchanges, they would just never pay taxes, right? Because they would develop Starbucks, put the tenant in there, refinance it, take some cash out, and then just do an exchange and go buy something else. And so, also, it's really pretty tough for ground up construction. California, it's basically impossible, but in other states, you may have a chance. Like I had a client who was a developer who actually held his assets. I think he built O'Reilly Auto Parts, if I'm not mistaken, and he could build a store in about 100 days. And so,
Yeah, that's the thing is the timing still applies, right? They have to have
right,
the structure complete within 180 days.
right. So for him, he was, owned 13 or 14 of these O'Reilly Auto Parts that he had built over the years, and he has sold one of them off that he owned for 5 or 6 years, and he was taking the funds. He did take the funds, use it to buy the land, and then make the improvements. The developers are, these guys are, in the business of getting these stores up and running. My brother, for a long time did developments for Western Dental, and they would not do ground up construction, but they would do huge remodels on existing buildings, some ground up construction, but mostly remodels. And they got very proficient at where they could, open a store in, probably 90 to 100 days. I guess now in California, probably a little more challenging with the, inspections and all of those types of things. But in other states, I had a client one time in Texas where he was going to do a ground up construction on a built to suit exchange. And I was like, ground up construction is tough. You probably can't get permits in time. Plus he's like, oh, no, I just drew up what I wanted to build and I took it into the planning and they said, yeah, that looks fine.
Everything's
I'm like,
easier
well,
in
it's
Texas.
a different world than we live in here in California for sure. He was in Texas, but so what a built to suit allows someone to do is they sell an asset off. They, are going to go buy a new asset. They're going to have leftover funds. and they could use that funds during the 180-day period to make the improvements. Now, the challenges are, one, we've got to create an LLC to hold title to the property. So if you're going to get a loan, that can be challenging. You need to make sure that you let the lender know what's kind of going on. And then, potentially how much improvements you can do within that 180-day period. But essentially what we do is we create an LLC that holds title to it. And while the improvements are being completed, we kind of act like a construction loan where the client authorizes us to make disbursements to these different contractors as the improvements are being completed. The reason that we hold title is because when you're doing an exchange, you're selling real estate, right? And so you have to use the funds to go buy real estate. And improvements aren't real estate until they're completed. So the idea is we hold title to this property, and then you are trying to complete these improvements. And once the improvements have been completed and we give you the property back, they're now real estate. So it is, I would agree with you, something that we don't see a lot of people doing. But I think, as our audience becomes more educated on, these types of nuances with 1031, you see more and more people kind of taking advantage of it.
So what kind of, obviously, like you said, in California, I've been involved with just not an exchange where like a sale I did at the end of the year where the seller had to do some demo work and had to get a permit just to do demo work. And the permit took 45 days just to get, for simple demo work inside of a property that already existed. So yeah, to have the turnaround for a build up or, a ground up construction, like you said, is probably pretty tough in California.
Yeah. On the commercial side, you see like, parking lots getting done. You see roofs getting done. You see HVAC getting done. Those types of things. Any kind of structural type of deals, engineering, that type of stuff. You typically are not seeing a lot of that type of stuff get done. And then on the residential side, you might, have a client that buys an apartment building, and maybe there's a couple of tenants that are, vacated units, and they're, using some funds to improve those units. And so that's something you see, or upgrade electrical, which is a big thing right now, as in California, with the insurance companies, you're having to a lot of times upgrade your electrical systems just to get insurance on your properties now.
I wonder, and it's probably the timeline issue again, but some of these outdated office buildings that somebody might buy to do an improvement exchange to retrofit them into other uses besides office. Have you come across any of those type cases yet?
We haven't yet, but I have heard talks on a smaller scale. Obviously, we're not talking about high rises, but on a smaller scale, some of the smaller deals, I have heard of people talking about, people doing conversions on those to residential. Also, I just read an article this morning about people talking about shopping malls and some of the defunct shopping malls converting those into senior centers. So, who knows? People talked about, I think the joke was like, oh, well, we'll just leave in the Blockbuster Video. The people will feel right at home. So, so I think we are going to see some of that, and built-to-suit exchanges certainly would be a vehicle that, someone could use to kind of help with that process.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Obviously, you would have to get the parties all on the same page, but if you knew you had a property you wanted to sell, and you knew that there was a property that you wanted to exchange into, that you wanted to do an improvement exchange on, is being able to, go through architectural and permitting and all of those things before you actually pull the trigger on everything.
Yeah, I do see like our bigger companies, like I'm doing an exchange for a pretty big corporation right now where they're doing like a built-to-suit exchange. And what they did was they found the land that they wanted, they put it under contract, and they put a pretty sizable earnest money to kind of give the sellers a comfort level that they were going to close. But what they're really doing was they were doing all of their due diligence, going through getting all their architectural done, basically all of their structural done. And so when they close on their sale, they'll immediately close on the purchase and kind of be able to hit the ground running. And so they'll have kind of all that stuff in place. So they have kind of longer escrow. I think their escrow on this deal was like almost 12 months. So It's not an uncommon, practice for developers when they're buying properties to try to get the longest escrow period that they can, so that their money is tied up. It's not tied up until they really can start construction.
Right. Well, and kind of the reason why I brought that up is just to really point out, which is a common thread that we don't only talk about here, but I share all the time, is every exchange should start with a plan.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The more time that you spend mapping it out, planning it out, being just really clear on what your short-term goals are, your long-term goals are, and what the ultimate thing that you want to complete from an exchange, whether it's a delayed exchange or a reverse exchange or build-to-suit exchange, is you can really do some really creative things, but you can't do it on the fly. You've got to have that plan in place and get everybody on the same page in order for all the pieces to fall, because the deadlines don't change. That's something that you got to deal with no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, when someone calls me early on in the process and they'll say, "Hey, what advice can you give me about doing a 1031?" I always tell them advanced planning. Advice that I would give to any investor that exists out there is that if you were talking to, a real estate professional about potentially selling your property and doing a 1031, and their primary focus is on what you're selling and not on what you're buying and on what you're trying to accomplish by selling this asset, then I would say you're probably talking to the wrong person. Because really, like, the most important part of an exchange, is you well know, is what you buy, right? It's not in what you sell. And so, because you're basically buying and selling in the same market, so it's really important that you go into it with a plan in place. Like, what are we trying to accomplish? Are we trying to increase cash flow? Are we doing it for geographic reasons? Am I trying to reduce management responsibilities? There's lots of reasons why to do a 1031. It's important that you understand what you're trying to accomplish, and then make sure it's executable. Make sure that you can accomplish that goal, right? And those are, things like, you have done for your customers in the past, where you're like, okay, let's come up with a plan, right? I know I can sell your property. That's not going to be a problem. Let's come up with a plan to make sure that we can, accomplish, the expectations that you have for selling and buying this new replacement property.
All right. Very good. As always, Greg, it's a pleasure having you here. Thank you very much for today's discussion, and for everybody watching. Thank you for joining us here on QI Corner. Don't forget to like, subscribe, make comments so that we can get back to you on those comments. And we will see you on our next episode.